think you're exaggerating. And I just have to call out, I think one of the greatest essays written of all time, the Adolph Reed 96 essay on Obama is incredible. I think it might be the best political call of all time. It's 12 years ahead of what, the Obama presidency, and he really gets it right there. But I think that's exactly right. But I also want to stress, I went back and actually read a lot of the Obama speeches with regards to foreign policy. So I'll just speak to foreign policy, which is what I know best here, is that he's left kind of, but he's not liberal. So for example, in the famous speech that makes him, the Chicago anti-Iraq war speech in the late 2002 or very early 2003, before the March 2003 invasion, he's like, I'm against Iraq because it's a dumb war, but I'm for smart wars like Afghanistan, and I'm basically, he says that he's in favor of American hegemony and keeping the empire going. So I think some of that was lost in the anti-war fervor of the late, 2007, 2008 campaign. But he's not pretending to be a revolutionary, but there is a patina of outsiderness, outside of the systemness, that he very much campaigned on. And he was, and I think he did that because of his own racial identity, right? He basically identified that as the like his very being demonstrated progress. And I think this is critical to understanding Obama as a person, someone who I've spent probably far too much time talking about, that he identifies his personal success with the progressiveness of the American nation. So the very fact of his success is the demonstration to him of the progressiveness of the American project. So it's a catch-22, because if Obama does something, it's progressive, because Obama is only able to do something like that because the American nation allowed a black man like himself to reach this position. And he says that, I think, in all of his memoirs. And it's a very big theme throughout the most recent book, which is the one that's going to be really read by people. This is the legacy book. Dreams of My Father and The Audacity of Hope are not really quite of the same caliber. So this is his final message, and that's, he identifies his personal progress with the progress of the nation.
Gene, do you have any statement you want to make?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that's extremely interesting observations, almost like le stat et moi, I am America, America is me. But what I wanted to ask you was if you could perhaps elaborate on. So when we talk about Obama's foreign policy, would it be correct to say that his position, especially even in 2007, 2008, was not a critique of empire, even in the sort of most tepid terms, but rather a question of imperial management and a reaction against the type of imperial management that had been undertaken by the Bush administration, and in many ways a kind of callback to the golden age of American hegemony, the 90s, and sort of the high point of liberal interventionism and U.S. U.S. Prestige around the world. Is he in a sense seeking to return back to the 90s after what many liberals see as the aberration of the Bush administration in terms of its foreign policy?
I think it's a really important question, because Obama is never quite explicitly restorationist. He's never Bush fucked it up, we need to go back to the 90s. What he's essentially saying is that everyone knows that the world needs a leader, and everyone knows that the United States needs to be a leader. And anyone who argues that is either a liar, a coward, or an idiot. And this comes through most clearly when he's talking about the leaders of the global South. And he says something along the lines, I believe I quoted in the article, or maybe it didn't make the final draft, but he says something along the lines of, no matter how much all of these global South leaders carped about U.S. imperialism and U.S. hegemony, when it came down to it, they wanted us there. They knew that we needed to be there. And if we weren't there, the world would devolve into chaos. And so I think Obama is very much a realist in the international relations sense. And if I'm correct, and I think I am, he was actually an international relations major at Columbia University in college, so it's not surprising. But he essentially believes that the world needs a hegemonic leader. that it's the natural push of international politics is to do that, which is the very IR theory way to approach things. And that he thinks the United States is the best leader. And why is the United States the best leader? Because a person like Barack Obama could become president. And this is the best that the world could hope for. And so his very, I think this cannot be overestimated. His very being is itself a justification. His very being as president is itself a justification for the empire. And that's his logic for it, really. And one thing I want to say, one more thing, is that it's kind of disappointing because I thought Obama would be like more of an intellectual, a little more reflective, but there's not really much more to it than that. He's not like offering sort of these like very thought through understandings of what international relations is. He essentially takes it that these assumptions are correct, and if you agree with him, you're a coward, a liar, or an idiot.
Well, he's at a functional level. Barack Obama is a professional managerial class careerist. He's a petit bourgeois, black careerist who basically is not rooted in any kind of oppositional politics. So his whole framing is going to be like, this is how the system works. This is how it's going to be. So I went to law school right across the river from Harvard, so I know how most of those folks tend to look at the world. And the reality of the fact is, though, is that the Obama project was something that was curated and manufactured early on, and that one of the things that Adolf Reed talks about very much so, and he's mentioned to me as well, is that Obama believes that the greatest gift to America that he gave America was himself. In other words, that he's profoundly narcissistic, and he's overimpressed with himself in terms of the importance that he represents, and doesn't realize that basically he's just a manufactured tool who was put in a place to protect the transition of capital into the 21st century with a charade of racial kinship to the black struggle that he has no organic connection to, and pimping out civil rights legacies to validate a neoliberal project.
Well, do you remember?
You think I'm wrong?
Do you remember when there was a lot of pushback from Cornel West? And I know this was when a lot of people started to throw Cornel West definitely under a bus. When I think it's his second term, he uses Martin Luther King's Bible to swear in on during that second election. And I remember very vividly Cornel West and Tavis Smiley pushing back on that extremely hard, and then catching hell definitely in certain black spaces for that. Do you guys all remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got Black Agenda Report guy was getting, Bruce and Glenn were totally outcasts from even people who were on the black left. All the friends of theirs that were liberal, like, no, I mean, let's understand something. The notion that the first black president was Henry Louis Gates wrote an article, I think it was in Time magazine, and I have a quote from the article in a piece I wrote, and it's in the Huffington Post, called "The Politics of Redemption." I've mentioned that piece a lot. Well, he said that Obama will not only redeem African Americans, but he will redeem America from its 400-year legacy.
Well, I remember, I think I was in Iraq when this happened, but there was that shooting in Georgia, and Obama sung Amazing Grace. And on Rachel Maddow's show, they like paused it, and she was like, I think we all have to listen to this extremely important moment in U.S. history, which really kind of speaks to the kabuki theater that liberal politics became under the Obama administration, and how everything became symbolism. And I think, and I hadn't thought of it in this terms, Daniel, but I think very much Obama, it seems that, Obama is at the center of this kind of, he sees himself as this figure who redeems America by his very being, which I find both frightening and fascinating. But one thing I wanted to ask you about particularly is, in what way did this kind of arrogance, and it does come off as, arrogance, there's no other way to put it, in what way did that shape his approach to global affairs in the post-Bush era? And in a sense, the kind of disastrous way, I mean, I think we can talk, and I think you mentioned in your article, there are successes to Obama's policy, sort of relieving, tensions with Cuba, and also, the Iran nuclear deal can be seen as another success. But the fact of Obama's sort of trust in the process ultimately meant that even those modest gains were easily reversed in the post-Obama era. So in what sense do you see Obama's sort of foreign policy being sort of shaped by his arrogance and ultimately being a failure, even in its own terms, as in trying to create a better managed empire and a smarter foreign policy?
Well, I think the existence of himself demonstrated to him that the empire was ultimately a good thing, because I think it's important to remember about Obama is that he's one of the few presidents after 1945. This is less true earlier, but after 1945 to like have genuine experience abroad. His mother, interestingly enough, was an MA in anthropology from the University of Hawaii, and she was spent a lot of her career, I want to say most, but I'm not exactly sure, working for private development groups. She's actually like quite a innovator, if you want to use that language. Is that she's one of the first people in the 1960s to work for private development corporations, which is an industry that really only took off in the 60s and goes strongly today. So she and a young Barack go to Indonesia, I believe in 1966 or 1967, which is of course right in the wake of the U.S. At least aided genocide, particularly in this instance of left-wing people, right? Of course, the Indonesian genocide of I believe 65, 66, gets going in 64. But anyway, so Obama is literally in a nation that experienced a genocide as a young person, goes up there, goes to school there, and is a young child there. So he actually does have a knowledge of the global South, and he winds up sort of like using that knowledge against itself, where he uses that sort of experience, or his experiences as a black person, to basically I think give a little bit of progressive patina to the normal operations of the American empire, because no structural changes are made, zero structural changes. I think you could say like the big Obama, the theme of his presidency is that in healthcare and the economy and foreign policy, you get tactical changes, but not really structural changes. And I think that holds true as well. And I think, again, it's this incredible arrogance that the world has rewarded, right? Obama's not a narcissist sitting in a basement. Like, the world has been telling him really since he went to Harvard that he's a genius and that he's destined for great things. So it allows him to sort of, in a moment when it's pretty clear that the American empire at least needs to be rethought, it allows him to not do that rethinking.